Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Monday nights are Abhijit nights. And we are going to have Abhijit jump straight into answering your question. We're hoping that we will answer all the questions posed today in this session itself. So let's welcome Abhijit Iyer-Mitra. Abhijit, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Very well, and thanks for having me on.
And a Vetrivel welcome to you also, and a Veeravel welcome to you. And let's jump straight into the questions now. Aditya B wants to know, what are some examples of brilliant application of military tactics and strategies in battles post 1955?
Ooh, very difficult question to answer. See, there was Dien Bien Phu. Was Dien Bien Phu in post 1955 though?
Not sure. How about the 6-day Syrian war?
Well, it was 54. So no, it doesn't
67,
count.
right? 6-day war.
Yeah. So I would say 56. What the Israelis did in Suez, but also what the British did in Suez. Remember, the British Anglo-British military campaign was a very successful one. The issue was that it was a political failure. But in terms of military tactics, it was brilliant. So that was number one. Then you come to the 67 war, of course. Right. Then you come to the 73 war, the Yom Kippur war. Again, brilliant application of tactics and strategy. The Falklands War. Imagine going and fighting a war 9,000 kilometers away. That was no joke. That was a brilliant application of strategy, and you can, literally go back and look at all the mistakes the Argentines made, and it was just sheer British, good planning that led to that victory, and a lot of Argentine mistakes, of course. Another brilliant application was, of course, 1971, right? For you to capture a country as big as Bangladesh in just 14 days requires a heck of a lot of planning and this thing. Of course, we also won the political battle, which was great. So that Falklands was in the 80s. I'm not going to count the Gulf War at all because that was just pure technology. Okay, it was just technology going berserk against an obsolete enemy. I'm talking more about peer competitors or against greater odds, etc., 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 and that's all I'm counting. But yeah, these were some of the really brilliant applications, and I think the next in line is what is the French operation in Mali called? I forget. Let me just check.
I don't remember. Yeah, go ahead. And while he's doing that, please like this video, and we'd like this to go seriously viral, because I'm going to ask Abhijit a question right after he answers this question before we go to the next question about something else. Are you done, Abhijit?
Yeah. So this was in 2013-14. It was two parts. It was Operation Serval and Operation Berkane. And they were truly brilliant because, you had the French controlling an area almost the size of India across the Sahel with just about 3,000 troops. And it was a truly, truly brilliant strategy what they did, right? The only reason I'm not including the Russian campaign in Syria, which has essentially wiped out ISIS, is because it was so heavy in losses and the sheer amount of time it took. But other than that, for me, brilliance is about brevity and minimum loss of forces.
Abhijit, I want you to take a step back and walk our viewers through how you saw the British Empire collapse one brick at a time, starting from May 1940, when Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister, up until 1961, when he finally died. But he made Anthony Eden, he kept him in waiting until actually he had to push him out. But all through that, the British Empire was just like careening down. Why don't you just walk us through quickly?
So see, the British Empire stopped being profitable starting in about 1911, but definitely by about 1919. Okay. And this is the difference between the American model and the British model. The British model was a mercantilist model, which was all about, manufacturing at home, keep everybody out of manufacturing and then create captive markets so that you can push your manufacturing. And the problem is, if people are getting poorer and poorer, there's not much of your produce that they're going to buy. Okay. What America does is mostly, don't go by Iraq, Afghanistan, and all of that. What they used to do was to invade countries, make them very rich, so that they could buy more American products, tie them into an alliance system, and keep expanding the market, which is a brilliant system. Now, the problem with Britain is its decline started in 1919. And this is why, remember, Dominion status was offered to India. Dominion status was given to Ireland. It was given to Ireland at about the same time it was offered to India, roughly. And remember, it was not the Congress that took it up on the offer. It was parties like the Swaraj Party and things like that that did most of the negotiation for independence. And even by that time, the British knew that the empire couldn't last. Once the economics of empire turn against you, there is no need for empire. In fact, I would say Churchill was one of those big-headed schmucks who exacerbated the downfall of the empire by going on hanging on to empire for so long, even though it was well past its use by date. Remember, India did not win her independence. Britain needed to cut off a part that was taking up too much money. Remember, they owed us $1.5 billion when they left, pounds, I think, which in modern day money is something like about 300, $400 billion. Because they industrialized Bengal. One of the side effects of the industrialization of Bengal was the famine. And, it was basically, in that sense, they then had a deficit with India. And the deficit became bigger and bigger. The Bengal industrialization actually widened that deficit. Occupation never makes sense when the cost of occupation is greater than the extraction. Okay, so it was all the independences that basically happened way too late, except Malaya. Malaysia was the only profitable province post 1920s of the British Empire.
Rubber. Thank you so much for that. And let's continue on with our questions. Aditya, again, have you read, explored skeptical nonfiction like Joseph Farrell, who has doubted the archaeology of the Bible, Torah, and ancient architecture? It's not speculative. Book name is Cosmic Wars.
I don't read fiction generally, but this is nonfiction, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read Joseph Farrell, actually. No, I haven't read, so I can't really talk about it. But I can tell you the guy whose Netflix series came about. What was his name? Just came about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Some Netflix archaeology series. Let's see. Got a lot of slack. Ancient Apocalypse. That's it. Ancient Apocalypse. What's his name?
No idea, bro. I have not seen Netflix in a long time. I'm just paying the subscription fees and doing nothing.
Yeah, okay. Because this Ancient Apocalypse thing, Graham Hancock, that's the guy. I'm sorry, but it's Codswallop. Ants across the world, from South America to North America to Africa to India to Australia to Siberia to Europe, build the exact same kind of nests. Hornets all over built the exact same kind of nests. Okay, that doesn't mean there was some ancient ant civilization or some ancient hornet civilization that disseminated that knowledge. I'm open to the fact that civilization can be pushed back maybe in before the last ice age, sure, but that it was some common civilization that disseminated knowledge, no. So I'm very, very skeptical about a lot of this, but I do take on the theories. I just don't have time to read through everything, but if somebody recommends them, I do read them. So for example, the guy who does a lot of work, Tom Holland, I've found a lot of things that are accurate about him, but I've also found a lot of things that are quite inaccurate as well. Right. So I actually enjoy this. So no, I haven't read Joseph Farrell, but I will read Joseph Farrell. Thanks for recommending him.
Next question, please. Kapil Gund wants to know. Thank you, Kapil. What are some healthy traditional Indian recipes? What changes do we need to make in our children's diet to improve their physique? This is your favorite topic.
Kapil, like seriously, who you asking, bro? Yeah. Does this look like somebody you should be asking this question to? Like I'm practically pregnant.
I thought you were on a weight losing spree.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. This is not the question you should be asking me. But I would say rasam is a fantastic traditional Indian recipe if you're vegetarian, and if you're a carnivore, if you're on the carnivore diet, then jangli mas.
Prince wants to know what is the best way to hand over Hindu temples back to Hindu hands? Who should take care of it? How should we ensure temples' resources are utilized for Hindu cause? A Hindu temple board, perhaps?
No, just give it back to who the owners were. What they do with it is their problem. A lot of them are private temples. Private temples can operate for profit. The issue is, can you exclude people from entry to temples on the basis of, say, caste, etc.? Shabarimala is a different issue. Kamakya is a different issue. There's a temple meant for transgenders just south of Madras who do not want other people coming into their temple. That's a separate issue. Okay, you can tell Sabarimala was clearly not a case of discrimination. It was a case of belief. And if this is a place where they don't want menstruating women, you have Kamakya where the menstruation of Kali is celebrated. She's venerated. That is when she's the most powerful thing around. Right. So I think a lot of this is a question of, and this is not a question that we need to answer before privatizing these temples. You hand them back to however they were run before, and as and when issues arise, they get adjudicated. I think this question of access and things. Yes, Hinduism does have a problematic issue of not letting certain castes into certain temples and things like that. But I think this is a fallacious argument just to keep postponing the handover of Hindu temples back to Hindus. Now, what those Hindus do with those temples, if they set up charitable trusts, etc., to fund Hindu education, all of that, great. If not, if it goes into private hands for profit, great. I don't care. I just want it out of government control. I don't want that money going into state coffers, full stop.
Next question, please. Kapil Gund again. Thank you, Kapil. Thoughts about MTA program, A400, C2, C390 or C130J?
C130J and C390, the 390 cargo hold is slightly smaller. The C130 is slightly more versatile. Okay. The C390 would have lower operating costs because it's a twin jet. And twin jets are always cheaper and jets are generally much better at performance than a propeller, though stall issues are there with jets. A400 is a fantastic plane. The problem is it's chronically overpriced. Okay, I think it's the perfect plane, and that they sell it as kind of tacto strategic. It's both a tactical lifter, higher and bigger and better than the C130, and it's almost strategic in the size of its cargo hold and things. But see, there's no easy answer to this. They're not. Each one has its strengths and its weaknesses. Personally, I would have gone for the A400 had it been cheaper, but there's no way you can justify the kind of prices that plane sells for, boss. No chance.
Next question, please. AJ_AJ. Abhijit, what role has Christianity played in insurgency of Northeast?
A very significant role, a very significant role. A lot of people, most of the church there is Presbyterian. I've spoken to a lot of police and army people who've told me, they dare not talk about in public because, oh, you're a Sanghi, you're this and that, you've infiltrated the military. But the church would go out of its way to provide aid to militants and things like that out there. They would stoke the militancy very frequently. They would use all kinds of tactics like whipping up, the population and things to protect militants, etc., etc. So a whole set of things.
So, how did the Irish make their peace with the United Kingdom?
हैं? ये
I'm
कहाँ
just
से?
asking you a question. I'm just asking you because in Ireland, there was insurgency going on for a long time just because of one being Catholic and the other being Protestant. How did that finally get settled?
Oh, the final settlement. Not so you're talking about
Yes.
Northern Ireland, not Southern Ireland.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, so it was two things. First, Margaret Thatcher broke the bloody back of the IRA. People don't realize how good intelligence driven operations were in destroying the IRA base. Okay, this was number one. Second, this was the same time that EU negotiations were happening. And remember, Britain was always going to be a much more important part of the EU. With the benefit of hindsight and Brexit, no. But in those days, Britain was going to be a much more important part of the EU than Ireland could ever hope to be. So there was a huge amount of pressure on Ireland at that point of time. There was also pressure being applied by Bill Clinton and America at that time. Okay, so it was a lot of pressure on the Irish government to give up its sort of ambiguity. The IRA was at its weakest point. And remember, here what happens is, when in India, for example, when one organization is crushed, the Pakistanis transfer all their things into two, three other. They always keep about 6, 7 organizations in play. So resources are transferred, etc., etc. That couldn't happen out there. It was just the IRA and Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin being the political arm, IRA being the military arm, and that was it. It was economic pressure on South Ireland and military pressure on the IRA. It was that simple.
Thank you so much. Let's go to the next question. Kanda Batata wants to know. Yeah, go
Just to
ahead.
add, keep this question on screen, don't remove it. But the other thing, of course, was the point of the EU was integration. It would have made border controls and things like that kind of invalid, which was kind of a very important enabler as well in loosening up. So it was some carrots as well given to the Irish.
Kanda Batata wants to know what are these Chinese spy balloons and why the US wasn't able to shoot it down earlier? How has India tackled spy balloons?
I've tweeted about India tackling spy balloons. We caught a PIA inflatable about 3 feet long and 1 foot wide. I've tweeted out the image 2-3 days back. No great plaudits to us for it. Chinese spy balloons, basically, they've been sending them over. They just, there was an incident last year where a spy balloon was also spotted over the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, spy balloons are important because, see, they fly under cloud cover and things like that. Satellites sometimes can't film through clouds and so on and so forth, right? So it's important in the sense that it's not powered. It can go anywhere. You have, unlike a drone which has to be controlled to fly, so you can't even say, hey, it just accidentally veered off course. A drone can't accidentally veer off course. A balloon can. Plus, it flies under the cloud. So there were all these things that the Chinese are using it for. I think it's a very stupid way of doing things. I don't know why they're doing it, but they do really bizarre things every now and then. I think they were hoping that the Americans wouldn't pick up on it. There's just a weather balloon and it would escape detection. It did not. And even the Indians, if you go back and read the reports, we also picked up that there was a Chinese spy balloon over the Andamans at that point of time, right? So yes, isn't that amazing? That's Pakistani spy balloon. And they actually had a press conference and announced it. You can see how proud they are displaying it. So yeah. And what was I saying? Spy balloon, bring up the question again.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't want to shoot it down earlier on because there was an issue. See, shooting it down is very easy. It's they couldn't do it because it was a case of the payload. When you're floating over populated areas and you shoot down the balloon, where is that payload going to drop? You don't know, right? So it was more of what comes down rather than what was flying up that delayed the shooting down.
Kanda Batata again. Was it a good call to send help to Turkey?
Yes, it was a very good call to send help to Turkey, because remember, you don't have earthquakes every day. So, how do earthquake rescuers practice? How do you go through the thing and realize your training might be great, but in the heat of the moment, you realize there were things amiss with your training. There are some things you didn't budget for with your training. There are things that you did not get trained for. There were loopholes in the communication system or the supply system or whatever. And that is why you should be sending your rescue teams to every single earthquake zone that you possibly can, so that they gain real life experience. It is extremely valuable experience. Think of it as a study tour. If it offends people so much, just think of it as a foreign study tour where you're going and getting a heck of a lot of knowledge, uh, putting your own systems into practice, but also looking at all the other teams that come there and exchanging best practices in a disaster zone, which is really important. Second, remember, there are things, which have a shelf life. So, for example, medicine, hydration tablets, water clearing tablets, because usually water pipes get broken. And so you have to take whatever water is available and put these distillation tablets and things like that. You have these energy bars and things to give out in case there is a shortage of food. You have medical supplies. All of these have an expiry date. You have to get rid of them. Okay, so you're giving them off and you're restocking new things. So it's very good for us. We should be doing more of it. My only complaint about this is we're not sending aid to Syria. Syria probably needs it a lot more because their state capacity is significantly diminished compared to Turkey.
Abhishek wants to know, sir, was adopting euro as a common currency a mistake? Can a similar type of currency work for ASEAN nations?
Euro by itself wasn't a mistake. I think all the additional ideology that went with the euro, common defense, immigrants, the welfare state, and all of that, that was the mistake. So by itself, it could have been very good. It was just all the additional political humbug that was added on the basis of euro integration that made it questionable. Now, can a similar type of currency work for ASEAN nations? No. And I'll tell you why. Because you need very, very powerful, very populous countries uh, willing to pick up the slack, at least for a short time, for the not so rich countries. Now, the richest ASEAN states are Singapore. Too small to pick up the tab for everybody else. All the other countries out there are third world, except Malaysia, which is kind of, I won't say it's second world, but it's kind of middle income-ish. It can't pick up the slack for everybody. So, whereas you look at the EU, the countries that needed uplifting were Portugal, Spain, Greece, Italy to a lesser extent, because Italy was a developed country. Don't forget that. People forget this because of the financial crisis. Even Ireland was quite developed. But these countries required uplifting, especially Portugal and Greece. And you had powerhouse economies of the G7 in the EU. You have Britain, you have France, you have Germany. 4 out of the 7 members of the G7
G7.
are European, right? So it was quite easy to. It wasn't easy. It was still expensive, but relatively you could pick up the tab. Everybody else didn't need that picking up. Remember, Belgium and Holland are very rich. Okay, Austria.
Norway.
No, Norway wasn't in the EU.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it joined later. This what's it called? Austria, very rich. All the other countries were very rich. They didn't require the level of support that, say, Portugal or Greece required. So it was easy to kind of set aside that money and lift them up. Germany spent less money getting Greece and Portugal up than it did on East Germany. I think people have forgotten the amount East Germany actually took out, the reintegration of East Germany took out of West Germany. It did that, and it still managed to succeed with Europe. Till all this ideology of immigrants and all that bullshit, democracy promotion and all that crap took over.
Next question, please. AK wants to know, what are some of the reasons why India did not become an Islamic country?
Partition.
That's a statement. Please expand.
Well, I've done a whole podcast about it on the Charvaka podcast on the end of Hinduism. Please go check it out.
Okay, no problem. Let's do that. Sachin wants to know, have you ever been to Yugoslavia? Was the US behind their split? Had India also would have split if it hadn't got nukes?
I've been to communist Yugoslavia, and then I've been to Croatia and Slovenia post independence. No, the US wasn't, but Germany was. It was all started by a guy called Hans-Dietrich Genscher, who was the foreign minister under Helmut Kohl. And he had this great, now remember, the CDU, CSU is kind of the rump Nazi party in a way, kind of. Not exactly, but kind of. And they had this great affinity for Croatia because, Croatia was one of the most steadfast allies of Nazi Germany. There was the 𝙒𝙗 and Ante Pavlic. Was it Pavle Antic? I think it was Pavle Antic, not Ante Pavlic. I forget. Google it. So he and the 𝙒𝙗 were one of the most committed and equally genocidal allies of the Germans. In fact, Jasenovac and the concentration camps that the Croats ran killed off more Serbs than most German camps killed off Jews. Surprise, surprise. So there was this great affinity. Croats also form a very powerful voting bloc in Hans-Dietrich Genscher's native areas. And so the problem was also the Yugoslav constitution, which allowed the constituent states to declare independence. Okay, so they declared independence. Germany immediately supported it. They circumvented the process. It had to be approved by parliament, but they circumvented the process. And Germany played a really malignant role in the breakup of Yugoslavia. Never forget that. Never forget that. Especially Hans-Dietrich Genscher, less Helmut Kohl, but Helmut Kohl also did a lot of it. Okay, so yeah, that was a big thing. And had India also split? No.
Sachin wants to know again, was Hinduism forced to reform in the advent of the growing popularity of Jainism and Buddhism, which was promoted by the then kings?
So I've read. I haven't explored this topic at all.
Prince wants to know, why does academia, media, other institutions dominated by left globally? What can we do in India to reduce left monopoly on these institutions? Can a state replace liberal elites? Replace?
Because humanities has always been the preserve of the left. They set all the social norms. Historically, they set the social norms. Okay. And as Lenin used to say, every idea is worth 1,000 pages of theory. They're fantastic. Look, have you seen the average JNU wala? He's a smelly, slimy scumbag who has no employment, whose parents have no proper employment, who just sits and keeps typing humbug, abstract humbug, 1,000 pages worth of humbug every month when they're working, when they're not drugged up and living off our taxes. But they do it. How much work does the right produce in that sense? So they focus on the humanities for institutional control. They also produce the work required. What does the right do? All we do is events. All we do is events, nothing else. Okay. So they also corner the academic funds distribution system for funding research. So it's an endless cycle. The right does not believe in investing in human beings. Surprise, surprise, in India, even abroad. largely. So there's very little you can do unless you come at it from that humanities point of view. Ultimately, the person who will probably end up in one part of the world, at least demolishing the left monopoly, will probably be a right winger who was once a left winger and understands it, how they work and how their institutions, how their. It's not a hive. It's not, cyborgs. Resistance is futile. No, they don't work like a hive, but they're disaggregated. But its end goal is common. ठीक है? And can a state replace liberal elites? Not really. You will always have the creation of liberal elites.
Next question, please. Vamsi wants to know, Q's to both. What are your take on budget 2023?
My take on the budget is the same as that brilliant minister, probably the best minister we have on our cabinet, Sri Ramesh Atavale. It is very good budget. It is budget for poor. It is budget for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. It is the budget for the common man. It is the budget for everybody. It is the very good budget. I think it is very nice budget. I think it is budget that will upliftments very much people out of poverty, and I think it is very good budget, very nice budget. But
Well,
simply,
viewers, if you
simply to condense it, I'm happy they did a lot of gave a lot of people a lot of exemptions while balancing the budget. I'm glad they brought in some kind of accountability where some part of the capital disbursement to the states is based on fiscal discipline, especially power sector reforms. So that was a very good thing. I think it's incremental. Did I want more? Of course I did. Am I happy with what I got? Yeah, sure.
No, I think this is another pedestrian, mediocre budget, and it has not changed much. In fact, it has just some, jugaad on numbers. Now they have an additional income tax slab when you should be actually reducing the slabs with the eventual goal of not taxing anyone at all. Don't tax income, tax the consumption. A country like India would do much better if you tax the consumption and also encourage companies to grow within India, give them tax credits for growing within India, and that
Shri,
way you will.
Are you forgetting Modi is left of Sitaram Yechury? So
Look,
for the neo
Modi is,
look,
didn't you tell? Sorry. Hold on. I have a problem with your premise.
for
I
the
thought
neo
you.
party of India called the BJP, for them to be doing this is not bad.
Listen, I thought it was run by bureaucrats with outside support from BJP. So why are you blaming Modi now?
I'm not blaming Modi. Did I say I'm blaming Modi?
No,
It
I'm
is
just
run by
saying.
bureaucrats. It's run by JNU trained bureaucrats, and the government is generally left of Sitaram Yechury.
Did Dr. P.K. Mishra go to JNU? Do you know?
I don't know.
He's supposed to be the brains behind this whole thing. Anyway, whatever.
Good for
Dr. Swami takes pot shots at that. And Vamsi wants to know, what are your views on Gati Shakti National Logistics Policy?
है? ये क्या है?
Well, it's just one of those interesting sounding, impressive sounding names. Wait, guys. We are still waiting to see the results of Smart City.
Yes.
So,
उसमें कुछ
Ishan,
नहीं हो.
yeah, I mean, they've stopped talking about all these things and now some new buzzwords keep coming. Listen, there has to be a change. Why should the the suffering middle class have to always pay the taxes when you have multi-billionaire farmers paying nothing? This is just gross injustice. I just don't see this thing at all fair at all. I mean, in US, everybody gets taxed, including the farmers. At least there's some equitable taxation.
Yes.
So, anyway, let's go to the next question. Ishan Sharma wants to know, what are the views on the opposition wanting to put the power sector back in public sector, which the current government has privatized? Do you think it is possible, and what form of government do you want?
Look, if they come back and decide to nationalize everything, nothing can really stop them, because right to property isn't a guaranteed right under Indian law. So they can nationalize, unfortunately. What I want is an actual right-wing government, not a left-wing government masquerading around as right-wing.
Not in our lifetimes.
Not in our lifetimes. It's we're living in Kali Yuga, you see, so it can't happen.
Vamsi wants to know, will the CCP be out of power at any point in the future? This is not related to breakup or something of China.
Not unless China breaks up, no.
Avinash Narayanan wants to know, thank you, Avinash. What have your problems been with Singapore Airlines service, and how has Singapore Airlines contributed to Vistara's decline? I also want to add, please go ahead.
So I'll tell you all my issues with Singapore Airlines service, right? First is the fact that I've almost without exception have had rude service on Singapore Airlines. Very, very mediocre food. I don't know why people go gaga over it. In business class, it is extremely mediocre. It doesn't matter if you book the chef and all of that. It's a buzzword. Oh, you booked the chef. Fantastic. Their business class seats are very uncomfortable. They're not optimized for sitting. They're not optimized for working. They are optimized for sleeping when you fold them over. And even there, I spend most of my time sitting. A bed is great, fine, but I spend most of my time sitting in different positions, and I don't like that seat. Okay. The next thing that ends up happening is, for a premium business class, there are business class and then there are business class, near first business class. They charge you at the very top, almost first class in several airlines. But they have set meal times. Who the hell does set meal times? I mean, I can understand you being a third-rate European carrier doing this stuff, but you can't be a so-called five-star airline and do stuff like this. That is an issue. That is a very big issue. Second, not second. This is like what the 10th or 11th point is that they have a certain attitude in dealing with Indians, which is much more pronounced than most other airlines that I've seen. Okay. Much more pronounced, much more so than Turkish, much more so than Lufthansa. Lufthansa is just uniformly bad. I mean, they're bad to everybody. Okay. The food is shitty across the board. So, Lufthansa is just shit. There's nothing you can do about it. Air France is uniformly rude. There's nothing you can do about it. Their food is fantastic, though. They do have set meal times, but then they don't charge you as much as Singapore Airlines does. They don't make a ooh-ah about themselves the way Singapore Airlines does. Okay. There is, so I have all these issues with Singapore Airlines. There is simply no price point correlation, right? Now, how has Singapore Airlines contributed to Vistara's decline? Well, very significantly. You see, when you operate a first world airline, you set these systems in place and you just expect them to go clockwork, because regulation and enforcement in that country is very strong and strict. You can't expect a Singaporean work culture to work in Vistara, which is why you saw that report that fellow, what's his name, did on Vistara, where the flight route operators were literally selling off flight routes in return for the flight attendants giving over half their dearness allowance for the destination, or sexual favors, or worse, and things like that. They completely terrorize their staff. It works in Qatar Airways because there's a certain... Qatar Airways also incidentally terrorizes their staff, but it works perfectly fine because there is quality control. Okay. In Vistara, they terrorize their staff, but there is no quality control. Same, you can't apply a first world situation or a racist Arab management on a third world country with Ram Bharose regulation and Ram Bharose internal and corporate regulation the way Vistara is. When Vistara started, it was an amazing airline. The decline is just so shocking, it's not even funny.
Okay, before we go to the next question, I want something to add. So far, I have flown about half a dozen airlines, and I list them out: Lufthansa, British Airways, Air India, United, Singapore, and Emirates. These are the ones that I've flown most of the time. The food across all these things, for one time, I'd like to see them not use cheese. You know, that paneer something for vegetarian food. Every meal invariably has this cheese, big uncooked or partially cooked cheese that is, terrible. That said, but that means that all food is uniformly mediocre in my opinion. However, I have some disagreements with Abhijit on service. I do think that Singapore Airlines service is very good. Air India is very good. The others are okay. I mean, uh, business class, I think they've figured out that most reasons why the most important reason why people choose business class is that they lead busy lives and they want to have that 6 to 8 hours of sleep, which means that they want to make sure that the seats recline into good sleeping contraptions, whatever you want to think of it. It's a little complicated the way those things stretch out, but having said that, I believe that is the prime reason why people travel business class. You and I, if you have to just sit and work, you can use the premium economy. You'll get the room and you don't have to sleep.
No, I never said I have to sit and work. I said I like to sit,
Oh,
right?
sit.
I
Okay,
like to
sit.
sit in a couch position. I like having thigh support. I like having infinitely adjustable seats, not pre-adjustments that are given to me. I never said Air India business class is bad. Air India, in fact, I found on the Paris route, on the London route, which are the only routes I've taken, on the Tel Aviv route, on the New York route, they do a I have uniformly had fantastic crews on those routes in Air India. The food has been terrible. That's a different matter. Sometimes the food is very good and sometimes it's awful. Very variable. But this was government Air India. The first time I flew private Tata owned Air India was the first time in Air India business class that I've gotten bad food. As in, it had gone off. It was rotten. The chicken tikka had been left outside for 8 hours or something and it had that foul, rotting smell on it. Everybody on the plane complained.
Ugh.
Okay. And this was a
You
Tata's
can get
experience.
sick.
This government of India experience, right? But Air India, I have always, I would any day prefer Air India over most other airlines. But these days, when I fly west, I fly Qatar. And when I fly east, I either take JAL or ANA.
All right. Next, please. Maliban Bhattacharya wants to know: did the Sino-Soviet border clashes threaten to spiral out of control? Who got the most from that limited war?
It was a draw. It was a draw. Nobody gained much. Uh, the Russians thought they would thrash the Chinese. They didn't thrash them as comprehensively as they thought they would. And no, there was, because there were no major gains, therefore it did not spiral out into, there was no threat of spiraling.
Next question, please. Soham Majumdar wants to know: sir, why the Indo-Saracenic architectural elements drew more Islamic architectural features than Hindu architectural ones, and what's your description for an ideal, pretty modern Indian architecture?
Mm. Well, it drew on Islamic architecture because Islamic architecture is closer to their understanding of architecture, to Western architecture. Okay, big, large, enclosed spaces, which have never really been a feature of Hindu architecture. So it was natural that it would gravitate towards that. Uh, the same kind of Western concepts, very similar or same Western concepts of architecture. It's described as an architectural core where people consider, even though their architecture is different, ancient Egypt, ancient Persia, and ancient Greece, which then became Greco Roman, uh, they're considered a kind of ideas continuum, but a stylistic variation, kind of, in the overall scheme of things. India is a completely different school. China is a completely different school, right? And because you had Islamic architecture in India, it was something they could connect to, and therefore it became very heavily influenced by Islam. But I think Western architecture is the stock standard of architecture that we take today, right? So my idea of pretty modern Indian architecture, oh dear, I don't think we have Um we have architecture made in India, but I don't know if it's Indian. So, for example, the Baha'i temple, the Lotus temple, I think is a very beautiful example. Is it Indian though, except the symbolism of the lotus? No. Um, I haven't actually seen big building. Small building, sure. There's this amazing guy called Benny Kuriakose who does typical traditional houses. Those are houses. We're talking about public architecture. And I don't think you have a good example of modern Indian architecture at all. You have very good modern Indian, very good few modern Indian interior designers. But you look at the Matri Mandir in Pondicherry, it's very serene. You go in there, you feel a certain piece, it's abstract. Is it Indian? No, it's very in the Western genre. So I don't think, at least I've not seen ideal, pretty modern. Actually, there is one tiny little. I think it's a private temple. Uh, Let me just check. Modern Hindu temple. It's a tiny little temple, and it. Um, I don't know if I can find it, but can we move on? And when I find it, I'll keep searching for
Yeah,
it. And
yeah,
when
yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah. Maliban Bhattacharya wants to know whether Soviets that paranoid about USA as reflected in the Hollywood movies. Add on question: how do you see Vietnam in context? Well, let's first ask this one: were Soviets that paranoid about USA as reflected in the Hollywood movies?
Yes, they were. They were absolutely paranoid about uh, um, um, America. And in fact, I would say the unusually the American movies have actually done a pretty damn good job of reflecting that paranoia. It isn't an exaggeration at all, you know.
How do you see Vietnam in context of France, USA, and China?
In what way?
I think politics.
Well, they've had conflicts with all three, but I don't know. Maybe
Simple Life wants to know: is Rogan Josh a Kashmiri dish or a Persian dish?
it's a Persian name, but it's an entirely Kashmiri dish.
Second question: what do you feed your pets? Are their meals home cooked?
Yes, I only give my dogs and cats home cooked meals. For the dogs, they have rice, three different kinds of veg. So no carbs, so no potatoes and stuff, carrots sometimes, but usually one water vegetable, so loki or kaddu or something like that. One green vegetable, so right now there's a lot of batua in the market, but palak, sometimes haksag, etc., etc. Depends on what's available. So one green for sure, and one other vegetable, usually beans or something like that, and chicken, and especially chicken liver put into their one piece of chicken liver each into their meal, and the bones are given raw separately, but the meat is cooked and it's given to them. It's always chicken. For the cats, we alternate. Sometimes we give them fish, and sometimes we give them chicken cooked. Because I would optimally give them meat raw. The problem is you can't trust Indian meat, so you can't give it raw. So even the chicken bones, for example, I just sterilize them quickly in boiling water. But the mutton bones, because I buy their mutton for me, I buy, and there's always extra bones left over, that I kind of trust and give it to the kids. I never give them dog food. We've had in my family, we've had so many dogs and cats. They never grew sick till pedigree and all this bullshit dog food crap started coming into the market. Sure, their coats shine much better when you give them dog food, like they're very lustrous and beautiful and all of that. But both my cat and my dog started getting tumors from that. And for these kids that I have, I decide absolutely nothing. This thing. Yeah, and even the chicken is organic.
Somehow Jain wants to know: did India have siege machines or did we rely on elephants? Don't see mention of something like catapults or trebuchet. Or is it because we didn't have decent forts?
Well, we didn't have decent forts. That's a different matter. But the earliest mention of a catapult is actually in the Mahajanapada Wars. Hmm. It's in one of Ajatashatru's campaigns, so about 700 BC ish. Apparently older than uh, uh, the oldest mention of a catapult. Similar to the Neo-Assyrian Empire, but they used different weapons. They did not have catapults. It's called a Mahashilakantaka, a hurler of great stones. And guess who talks about it? Everybody's favorite historian, Romila Thapar. It is the earliest known mention of a catapult anywhere in the world. So we did have siege machines. The problem, of course, is, with documentation and things like that, we're terrible. The Egyptians at least painted their stories on walls. We don't do that. So there isn't much knowledge about it. But yes, epigraphically, we did have the Mahashilakantaka.
Abhishek wants to know, sir, various NGOs and human rights organizations have accused the US NATO soldiers of sexual crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. How accurate are these accusations?
Do you realize you've perpetrated a human rights violation on me by assuming my gender and calling me sir? But anyway, that aside, there have been a lot of cases. You can't avoid these things, unfortunately. As a rule, militaries will always have you guys seen that series Dexter on the serial killer? How his father realizes,
Sure,
his
sure,
adopted
yeah.
father realizes he's a serial killer, and the only way he can survive is if there's a method to his killing, and he can only camouflage if he joins the police. Now, the army gets a certain kind of people. The officers are different. It is largely a blue collar intake, but it is somebody who is, I won't say predicated to violence, but their tolerance of violence is significantly less. Not all, but a significant portion. And by significant portion, I mean about 5 to 6% statistically across militaries. Hmm. Those are usually the most indisciplined troops, that 5 to 6%, troops and officers. There will always be human rights violations where you will not have a single military campaign where things like this do not happen by any country, anyone. Okay, so statistically, it would be accurate.
Next question, please. Aditya B wants to know, why aren't there any Michelin star restaurants in India? What is missing?
Well, Michelin hasn't arrived in India yet. Okay, Michelin hasn't decided to rate Indian restaurants. And I think the Indian way of cooking and eating does not suit a Michelin star thing at all. We have a different way of eating. We eat in a thali. How does a thali qualify? It is Michelin that has to adapt. How do you compare cuisines? I mean, I don't get it. Kashmiri cuisine, for example, I would never compare with Tamil cuisine or Andhra cuisine or Bengali cuisine. They're all so different, or Guju cuisine. They're so different. Okay, so how do you compare our cuisine with Persian cuisine or with Japanese cuisine? Technically, a bento box is a thali, right? If you go to a Japanese restaurant, a bento is basically a thali. But the emphasis is totally different. How do you do that? It's there's a whole load of things which are simply, I've been to these sort of wannabe uh, uh, Indian vying for Michelin star restaurants. Some of them work by being quite Western, and some of them, a lot of them just don't work at all. Because I've actually had, so everybody's favorite Indian accent, they do Golgappa, where they serve you these six. Let me try to find my tweet about it. I think. Um, Indian accent. I want to show you this. This is the Golgappa, dahi papdi chaat and Golgappa and all of that. They serve all of this. I don't have a picture of the Golgappa, unfortunately. Alas, I don't have a picture. If somebody can go to my Twitter and see.
We can do that while we keep continuing, Abhijit. We
Anyway,
can do that. Yeah.
yeah. So what happens is, we have this whole thing about it's 5 or 6 Golgappas served with pomegranate Golgappa water, pineapple Golgappa water, the traditional mint, coriander, dhania water, etc., etc. And you put them in your mouth, they're just not good. Your roadside Golgappa wala does a much better job of it. A Michelin star restaurant is not going to rate your roadside Golgappa wala. So you're being rated in a way that is for a food that is shishied up but doesn't taste good. I think one of the few chefs, there are chefs who do a pretty good job. So for example, Suvir Saran does a fabulous job. There is Vicky Ratnani who does a good job. The question is, how far are you willing to take it to comply to a French idea of what cuisine is? Because no matter what you do, a kosher mangsho will taste fabulous. It's just not going to look good. A begun bhaja and luchi is just not going to look good. A rasam sadam is just not going to look good. You can't do all that fancy shishi deconstructed, even if you deconstruct it. It's just not going to look good. Or if it looks good, it's not going to taste good. What do you do?
All right. Next question, please. And this is the last one. Oh, we have found something. Here we go. There's your. There you go.
There you go. 5. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. And it was good. The problem is it's not a patch on what you will get on your roadside shop. And that's why it's served in small quantities, see? Because when you taste it, you're like, interesting. Would you have it again? No. Would I crave this? Absolutely not. Do I get a craving for Golgappa like a rabid dog? Yes. If I don't eat Golgappas at least once every 2 weeks, I go mad.
All right. Last question from Hardik Thakkar. Why do we have regiments in the army based on caste like Dogra, Rajputana, Maratha, etc.? Don't we have better names? Army people care a damn about it, but doesn't it leave a wrong impression to a civilian?
Yes, it does, but this is what the British did. Okay, they didn't want. They felt that dividing it on the base of caste like this, caste and region, prevented a repeat of 1857. I think his name is Ian Wilkinson, who's written this history of the Indian Army. Ian Wilkinson. I think it's Wilkinson Indian Army. Let me just check. Wilkinson Indian Army. Yeah, Stephen Wilkinson, Army and Nation, the Military and Indian Democracy. I highly recommend that book. It will show you how much thought our founding fathers put into avoiding a coup in India. Pakistan never put that amount of thought in. Coups haven't happened in India by sheer accident. They haven't happened because our folks like Sardar Patel, Rajgopalachari, Ambedkar, they put a lot of thought on what the problem was to prevent it. The British put in a lot of thought to avoid a repeat of 1857. So he talks about a lot of the caste angle and how it was all done. The martial racist theory and all of that to prevent that kind of unity happening.
Before we go, I just want to show one thing. Darth Begum wants to know, somebody inspired from you, taking new names. Thank you for this channel. We need similar channels, JD, USA, Sham Sharma Show, etc., to bring awareness in the West. Otherwise, CARE, IIMC, working hard at attacking Hindus. Thank you very much, Darth Begum. And as always, a pleasure having you, Abhijit. And we'll be back again bright and late at 9 p.m. on next Monday. Thank you so much. Namaskar.